They were all there. Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker. And I couldn't move. I was like paralyzed and I was naked and I couldn't move, I couldn't talk. So he sort of used to see how far he could sort of push people, I guess. Sorry, I get anxious about this.
Yeah.
When we were taken to his bedroom, it was always pitch dark and ice cold. Waking up in a laboratory with 6 people in hazmat suits around me.
How do you feel about the Trump administration's statements this week about Epstein?
I think it's horrific, actually, especially when Trump gained presidency promising the list. He told me he worked with CIA. He told me he had my family's name on a list.
It was the government doing it, so you can't really get the government to tell on itself.
A lot of people want to judge girls who are taken there and stuff, but they don't know what it's like being kidnapped by the most evil people in the world.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we are interviewing Juliette Bryant, a survivor of the Jeffrey Epstein human trafficking network. I'm super honored to have her, and I think this is going to be extremely important information for everybody, especially in light of the recent super abysmal treatment of the entire topic of the Epstein client list by the current administration.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years. You're asking, we have Texas, we have this, we have all of the things. And are people still talking about this guy, this creep?
You know, I just think that listening to the victims right now is obviously not only the most important thing, but the only thing we can do, because we can't listen to our government. That ship has sailed. So Juliette's story is not one of just survival, but radical courage in the face of true evil. She's breaking through the elite's attempts to silence her by choosing truth, regardless of the cost, and we're lucky and blessed that she's doing it with us today on this channel. Juliette's testimony is an inspiration to me, and I know it will be to all of you as well, serving as proof that regardless of the size, of the power, of the evil that she and all of us are facing right now, I truly believe that God is working through Juliette and using her to tell us the truth that our government refuses to. So Juliette, thank you so much for being here today. I know this isn't an easy topic, so I'm really thankful you're here.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Blaire. And also thank you to everyone for listening. And I can see also from your interviews you do, Blaire, you really care and you're fighting for justice. And thank you for that. So I'm really honored to be on your show. Thank you.
Yeah. So I think the most logical place to start is, how did this monster, Jeffrey Epstein, and his operation enter your life to begin with? What was your life like when you fell victim to this? What were the circumstances of your life, and how did it all come to be?
Well, when I met Epstein, you know, my family were having a hard time financially, and I was also starting to study. I wanted to be a psychologist. My plan was to do art therapy and help with children. And then I started doing modeling on the side to make money, because I was already scouted when I was 14 years old to do modeling, but my mum wouldn't let me do it. So this was when I was 20 years old. I'd been scouted again, and I eventually started modeling. And then just to make money, of course, you know, I really wanted to be a therapist and I wanted to help people. And then one night I was out with a friend of mine and we met a girl called Naja Hill. You know, we didn't know who she was at the time. Of course, she was just a sort of, you know, no one really does. But, you know, apparently now she works for Fox News. But she approached a friend of mine and I and said that her friend Epstein was here, Jeffrey Epstein, and he was with the President of America, the ex-president Bill Clinton. She said he was here with Bill Clinton and Kevin Spacey, and he owned Victoria's Secret with Leslie Wexner. And he said she said it would really help my modeling career to meet them. So of course I was like, I wanted to meet them because it seemed like the most legitimate opportunity. You know, it seemed like a dream come true, really. You know, I'd always been hoping that I would, you know, be able to do something with my life, you know, just with the modeling models always hope for like their lucky break. We went from the restaurant bar to the restaurant where they were having dinner, and they were all there. They, you know, Jeffrey Epstein, Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, they were having dinner with a few government officials. I'm sorry about my dogs in the background, but everyone
That's fine.
understands protection dogs. Got to have
Yes.
them.
Yes.
Um, so the government officials didn't stand up and meet us, but Bill Clinton, Kevin Spacey, Chris Tucker, and Jeffrey Epstein, they all stood up and shook my hand. And I was very like starstruck, and I didn't know who Jeffrey Epstein was at the time. Obviously, no one did. I just thought, oh, it's some man who sort of runs the world, King of America, is what I was told, with the president and all these other people. And I was just like starstruck because I just turned 20 years old. I was young, and I'd never met any celebrities in my life. And when Bill Clinton shook my hand, like he just held onto my hand and then he went like this and he started talking to someone else. And he held onto my hand for like at least a minute and just carried on talking to them for ages and ages. And after like 1 minute, he looked at me again and he said, "Nice to meet you." And I was like, stop, like, it was scary having this man holding onto my hand for so long. But I didn't know what to do. I was just like overwhelmed. But and also I really, back in the day we really trusted in people in positions of power. We didn't know as much
Right.
as we do now about how dodgy
Right.
they really are. We
And
really
right
thought that
off
they
the
were good
bat,
people.
if I can just make one comment right
No,
off the
I'm sorry,
bat,
Blaire. I'm sorry, Blaire, yeah.
that
So,
that already, to me, that communicates that he is not at all concerned with your boundaries, to hold on to you as if you have nowhere else to move around the room or anyone else to meet. It seemed like he was already crossing boundaries with you because he was likely very comfortable doing it with other women and girls before you. Just that small thing.
yeah, it was so weird. Like, and now with people saying about clones and everything, I'm almost wondering if it was a clone. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Maybe.
I'm sorry. Sometimes we just have to laugh to like get over trauma. And if
Oh,
I
I get
laugh, it's
that.
not because I think this is funny. It's because, just because I was sexually molested does not mean I can never laugh again.
Oh,
I did
I,
some
I
video
get
and
that.
yeah, you know what I
Yes.
mean. And I actually
Yes.
want to
And
touch on that. Yes.
you deserve to laugh more. You deserve
Mhm.
a life of laughter and happiness now after everything. So, sorry, I didn't want to interrupt your story.
Yeah.
So, where you were going
Yeah, but
from
it's an
there?
important thing for all survivors of abuse. Just because people have been abused doesn't mean they're never allowed to be happy or laugh ever again.
Right.
You know. And so anyway, after we left there, then Naja Hill phoned me the next day and she said Epstein really thought you have a lot of potential for modeling and he'd like to see your modeling book. Will you please bring it to the hotel where they're staying for a modeling casting? But before the modeling casting, they're going to be doing a speech at a university in Cape Town. So I was like, oh my God, yeah, of course, So I got in my car, I had a little city golf and I drove there and then I got in they had like buses, but like small mini buses, and I got in the bus with them and went and watched Clinton's speech. And Kevin Spacey sat in front of me in the hall. It was a very like basic hall. It was not the kind of place you'd imagine to see a president giving a speech. It was very basic. And there were a lot of students around. And Kevin Spacey sat there with the handheld device just filming everyone. Like I was sitting right behind him, so he even probably got my face on the film. He was filming like this around the whole hall of all the students. And I don't know why. At the time, I just thought, okay, he's, doing a bit of research on Africa and they're filming for their speech. But, it is very strange that he was filming everyone, especially considering the allegations that have happened to Kevin Spacey all these years later.
Yes,
12
and it's
people were.
always
Um,
it always seems to be the same names that come up. You are far from the first person to talk about Kevin Spacey in this context, Bill Clinton in this context. There seems to be a very just out there and known client list in many ways, which is why it's
well,
so horrible. But keep going.
I got on the airplane. He patted the chair next to him like this, and I went and I sat there. And then, when the plane took off, he started touching me in between my legs. And I don't want to talk about this because it actually that just freaks me out. It stresses
Yeah.
me out a lot and puts me into panic. Because then I knew that they were going to try kill me if I didn't comply. And my name was not on that flight log. My name was on many other flight logs, but they left my name off that flight log. Sorry, can I have a cigarette break? And
Yeah.
you ask me any other questions from here. Sorry.
Yeah, 100%. You're fine. You're fine. And again, this is why, before we started, I said any topics that you don't want to talk about, I'm down to not talk about them. And, certain details are yours and yours alone. So,
I will, I'm happy. I will talk about everything, but it's just like
yeah,
just
yeah,
that specific time in my life. It's like it was like very very frightening, you
yeah,
know.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
it's easier to yeah, and then you tell me any other questions, and I'll keep going.
yeah. I know that Epstein had many locations that his operation was, happening at. There's the island that most people know about. He had a place in Florida. He had a ranch in New Mexico. Um, I guess we can start with just the most known location. What was your experience at the actual island?
Well, you know, Blair, they actually took me to all the properties. I was taken to New York, Caribbean, Palm Beach, Paris, and New Mexico. They took me to all of those places. So we can definitely touch on, you know, to speak about each one. The Caribbean, you know, arriving there was very isolated, of course, and you know they had our passports, and you know we couldn't really get away. And the first day when I arrived there, because you know when they took me from New York, so we would land on, I don't know exactly which island it was. It was obviously St. Martin's or St. Bart's. I think it was St. Martin's, but I'm not sure. And then a helicopter would take us from there to the island. And you know, when we were on the island, what would happen is we'd just be called to his bedroom, like in the day. We were never called there in the night, which I think it's, you know, like people think there was like alcohol and drugs. There was nothing like that. Like, you know, even as a smoker of cigarettes, like, you know, I had to smoke far away from everyone. I never saw anyone drinking alcohol on the island ever. I never ever witnessed one person drink alcohol. Um, but we'd be called to his bedroom like 3 times a day. And on the first day, it was just me. And then the next day, like another girl was brought in. And then she started giving him a blowjob in front of me on when we were watching a movie. But I just ran away because I got such a fright. Um, so he sort of used to see how far he could sort of push people, I guess. Sorry, I get anxious about this.
Yeah.
But you know, when we were taken to his bedroom, it was always pitch dark and ice cold. The temperature in there was ice cold, and it was like pitch dark. And yeah, and then he used to like force orgasms from like that's what he did to me. I don't know what he did to other people. And you know, his penis was actually very small. Sorry to bring this up, but you know, it was like the size of a mini lighter. Um, it was very like just like frightening, like you know, yeah, it just really messed with my mind to be honest. You know, like a lot of people want to judge girls who are taken there and stuff, but they don't know what it's like being kidnapped by the most evil people in the world. And people want to say I was a prostitute. I was never a prostitute. I've never been offered money for sex. I mean, I had someone try to marry me and plonk a 4 million rand, like a $400,000 diamond on my finger, and I told them, no, thanks, I don't want it. I'm not a prostitute, and I want people to understand that.
Do you keep in touch with any of the other victims? Because I think what's lost with the Epstein story is, we hear a lot from different politicians, whether they're using the topic to, be elected, a lot of them use it in their campaigns and then they get in and they flip, which has been very disappointing. And we hear people talking about the people who may be on this client list, but there are over, if I'm not mistaken, over 1,000 known victims of the operation. And so they aren't speaking out, and you can see the stakes, the high stakes. Unfortunately, the lovely woman Virginia who came forward and has been one of the more known victims, she passed away recently after posting that she wasn't suicidal, and then lo and behold, God rest her soul, she gets hit by a truck.
Virginia and I used to speak, yeah, bus, yeah, but that was a lie. Virginia and I used to speak. We've done many video calls, much like I'm speaking with you now. You know, I've spoken to her. We were on the phone together. You know, but then about 2 years ago, I was told she messaged me and she said that she's not going to be on her phone anymore, and I must get in touch with her through her husband's email address. But we sent a few emails back and forth, and then suddenly she just sort of like slowly, I didn't hear from her anymore. And I can also understand why, with she was being inundated, I'm sure, with people wanting to ask her questions and the whole thing, and also, I think she ended up having to see get put on pills, as what I've heard. A lot of people who go through tremendous stress. When I got back from Epstein, I was put on 3 tranquilizers a day. I understand it. I don't do any pills anymore. This was 20 years ago.
Hmm.
They put me on 3 tranquilizers a day. That's why I'm also very anti-pharmaceuticals and things. But, I was in touch with, I'm still speaking to Maria Farmer, thank goodness. She's an amazing woman. Sarah Ransom and I used to speak, but not anymore. There have been some strange things going on with a lot of like I used to speak to even like Michelle Lecarte. I've spoken to quite a lot of the victims over the years, but everyone's sort of numbers have changed and people have gone quiet, and it's just, I don't, I've spoken to Annie Farmer as well. She's an amazing woman. Only Maria and Annie are the only ones who I'm still like in touch with.
How do you feel about the Trump administration's statements this week about Epstein and the supposed client list? What are your thoughts on how our current government is handling it?
I think it's horrific, actually,
Hmm.
especially when Trump gained presidency, promising the list, and then now he's like, "Oh, why are we still talking about that guy?" It's like, how stupid do they think we are?
Right.
What I want to say to Trump is much like he said to others on The Apprentice: "You're fired." Well, he should be fired. And Pam Bondi, well, hasn't Cash Patel and Bongini, apparently they're going to retire. I mean, not retire. They're going
Resign.
to resign. Yeah, well, they should. I mean, and apparently 2,000 people who work for NASA also resigned in the past week.
Hmm, that's interesting. From NASA?
Yeah,
I didn't know
they're
that.
saying it's
That's
just because of
interesting.
pay cuts. Yeah, look it up online. They say it's
Hmm.
because of pay cuts. I don't think so. Yeah,
Hmm.
2,000 of the senior people at NASA are apparently resigning. The FBI are resigning. Why?
Right. I completely agree with you. I think it's been so disappointing is an understatement. I think it's very insulting. Specifically the way that Trump spoke about it. Are you still talking about this guy? As if there's something inappropriate or strange or incorrect about
Yes.
inquiring about justice for you and these other victims and to know the truth about the people running this world. For me, I've always, you know, known that he was connected to Epstein, as so many powerful people are. But this week has really solidified that even if he is not, someone who has committed crimes through Jeffrey Epstein, he definitely is someone who is too ashamed of whatever relation they had being outed. And it's just really, really insane to be able to say that we live in a country that is covering up for pedophiles. But sadly, actually, it's not that insane because this has been going on forever. So it's just more proof that we really can't vote ourselves out of this, you know, situation. I don't think there is a political solution for this. I think there's only, my personal opinion, a spiritual solution to this. And, until we get it together as a society, I just don't know what's going to be the future of this. But you're absolutely justified in thinking that it's horrific the way they've handled it. From the top to the bottom, from Pan Bondi all the way up to Trump, it's been very, very scary. Do you
Yeah.
think that, why do you think Trump is joining in the line of other presidents who have chose to keep this a secret? Why is he hiding the Epstein files?
Well, I think they all really work together if you think about it. Epstein actually told me he was friends with Donald Trump. When I was taken to Palm Beach and we drove past Mar-a-Lago, he told me that his friend Donald Trump owned Mar-a-Lago. So, I think these people, they all run in the same circles. It's much like if people who live in New York or people who live in London, if you're going to the bars and restaurants where the wealthier sort of contingent are going, you're going to run into these people.
Yeah.
And I just think it's absolute bullshit that Donald Trump gained presidency and now he's saying, who is that man? Why are we talking about him? Well, there are photos of him and Trump laughing together at the party that Trump held with all the girls around. There are many photos of them all together. The only person that there's no photo of Epstein with, as far as these high-powered people goes, is Elon Musk. There's no photo of Elon Musk with Epstein. I know there's a photo of Musk with Maxwell, but at the end of the day, they all know each other.
Yeah, 100%. And speaking for myself, I did vote for Trump. And I thought that based on the fact that he was promising to release the Epstein files and, disclosure about other topics, by the way, and he's really failed on all of those. He disclosed only a fraction of the Kennedy files that still left people with a big question mark as to what happened, even though many of us obviously
Yeah.
know through our own research. He promised to release what was up with the drones in the sky, and that's something that people
Yes. The
skip
drones, what
over.
happened with that? That's
That's
exactly what I said recently. Everyone just forgot about it.
that's one of those
What was that?
stories that is insane because we have a right to know if there's strange sky vehicles, on both
Well,
coasts of our country
I
and what
saw
those
you
are and if
ago
that's a threat.
in New Mexico. And I saw Epstein
Can
turn
you say
into
that one more
something.
time? I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, well, I saw in New Mexico, I saw a UFO in the sky. And then I've got that flashback weird memory waking up in a laboratory with six people in hazmat suits around me and a female doctor. And I couldn't move. I was like paralyzed and I was naked and I couldn't move. I couldn't talk. And then this doctor came near my head and she said, "Don't worry, everything's okay." And I was out again. And I also saw Epstein shapeshift on the island. That was before. This happened in New Mexico. When I was in on the island, I saw Epstein like suddenly, and people have actually asked some pretty good questions recently. It wasn't like I saw him turning like the Incredible Hulk. What happened is it was when I was taken in the bedroom the one time, and he had like a blanket up to here. And then I looked away and I looked at him, and suddenly it wasn't him anymore. It wasn't like I saw him turning. It was like it was him. And then I looked away, and then when I looked back, it wasn't him. It was this weird creature. And then I looked away, and then I looked back, and it was him again. And I can't really explain that. I mean, I can explain it as well as I can, and I can understand. Do you know what? If someone else told me this, like I keep saying, I wouldn't believe it. I
Yeah.
totally wouldn't. I'd be like, okay, this person's either mad or they were on drugs or something. But the
And
problem is that I saw it and I wasn't on drugs, like as far as I know.
100%. And just so you know where I stand, I don't think that people's unwillingness to believe something that sounds fantastical, or I don't think that people being unable to go there in their head and really believe you, I think that has zero relevance to whether or not it actually happened. I do believe you. And, this is an insane world with technology we're not allowed to know about. The explanation, one of the explanations could be a technology. And maybe he did that to instill more fear in you. And, when it comes to the occult, which when we're talking about shape shifting, that would fall under that sort of category. But, occult just means hidden. If people think that this word means something different, it means hidden by definition. And technology can absolutely be occulted. So there's occult technology, there's occult, you know,
You're right. Yeah.
there's a lot of things and there's a lot of explanations for why you could have seen Jeffrey Epstein shapeshift. And I believe you 1000%. In my
Thank you.
life, I have had experiences that if I were to say them out loud in the way that you just did, different things, but if I were to say them out loud, people would say that I sound crazy. And so that's how I know that nothing is off the table. So let's talk about that. This is the part of your story and of other victim stories that I've heard and read about, this occult aspect, this strange spiritual reason for why they were doing so many evil things on this island and other locations. What do you
Yeah.
know, or what did you experience related to their occult beliefs or spiritual beliefs that might differ from what people typically think of as, regular belief systems or religions to have?
Well, you see, a lot was hidden from us when we were there, and but over the years, after everything that's happened, obviously I never spoke about what happened. I couldn't even tell my family about what had happened. But when Epstein died and reporters started contacting me, I was given more time to sort of process, the trauma. It was like, when you just so petrified that you just compartmentalize it, you put it away, and you keep
Hmm.
going, like in a frantic, I realized I've been in a sort of frantic trauma ever since then.
Hmm.
But, when they gave me the settlement money, I had time to sort of step off the hamster wheel of life. And I wanted to figure out for myself what happened because of
And
all the
by the
things that
way, I don't want you to forget what you're saying, but you just brushed past something very important, and I think people need to know about your story is that you received $1 million, if I'm not mistaken, settlement over this. And so anybody who wants to doubt your story or
yeah,
aspects of your story, you have been paid out for this, and thank God. But,
I got two settlements, in fact, one from the
okay.
Epstein estate and also one from JP Morgan.
Mm,
So, the one was $900,000 from the Epstein estate.
wow.
And then the JP Morgan had to pay out $1 million.
Yeah.
But, apparently there was no human trafficking going on. But they
Right.
paid that money because of human trafficking. They paid $290 million to the victims for human trafficking,
Right.
which shows you that they're doing something else. And that's what, we're getting to here is that these people are up to a lot more. And when I had time to sort of learn to breathe again, and, I saw therapists, my brother helped pay for me to see therapists, and an ex-boyfriend helped. I've had a lot of amazing people help me through the way, which I think a lot of victims haven't had. Sorry, and I just started doing more research just for myself. I actually wanted to just draw it, like like on the police boards, they draw a map, and they're like, in the middle you'd have Epstein, then you'd have CIA, then you'd have Clinton. You know what I mean? Those sorts of boards where you write it all. I started writing it all down to try and figure it out, and I realized there was too much to write on just a board. I did it on a piece of paper, and then I realized I had to sort of put it all in a book. So I just started writing and writing and putting stuff together. And so basically, I just started gathering information. And the more and more I figured out, the more and more frightening it got. Because, when I came back from there, I didn't know they were taking my eggs or anything like that. But,
They
after
were
being
taking
back,
your eggs.
well, I think it's very, very likely because of everything that happened. And also, Epstein gave me like a pelvic exam before I was sent home the one time. I didn't see any girls being trafficked to other men. The only people I met there were like scientists and Michael Bay, the movie producer who made the movie The Island about cloning. I met Michael Bay there in
Wow.
2004 in New Mexico. And he denied being there because I did it. This no, none of the media would ever put my story out there, which is what's obviously happened with a lot of other victims. But an amazing girl from the Daily Beast called Kate Bricklet wrote my story down, and she actually contacted Michael Bay's people, and they said no, he's never met Epstein, he's never been there, but he was there. He's lying, and I know and I can even tell you that when I was taken to LA after all this, and he tried to take me back to his house also. So if he wants to lie further, then I'll expose him further. You know what I mean? And I'm not scared
Mhm.
of them anyway. Well, I am a little, as we all are, but I'm like, if we're all scared of them, then when's the truth ever going to come out? Because we've got to realize there's more of us than there are of them. So anyway, going back to The Island, the movie about the cloning, it's got Scarlett Johansson in it. When I watched that movie again, I realized it looks like all the clones are escaping from a place that looks like New Mexico. So I suddenly realized maybe Michael Bay was at Epstein's property doing research. Because when I met Michael Bay and scientists there, I would see them on the tops of the properties. I'd see them there, but I'd never really see them again. I'd meet them like once or twice. And then I'd never see the rooms they were staying in or anything. And it made me realize that there's very likely something underneath there. And also because I saw him turn into that thing. It's just and the UFO that I saw, that was while Michael Bay was staying there in New Mexico when I saw that and had that flashback waking up in a laboratory. And just after after just digging and digging and digging, I realized, if these bastards really do drink blood, if they really do kill children, it would make sense for them to have their own farm of humans. And it's much like shows like Westworld. It's possible. And just one more thing before you, sorry, Blair, sorry, Blair. In 1996 they cloned a sheep, Dolly the sheep, and they made it publicly announced it. And then guess who banned federal use of funds for human cloning? Bill Clinton banned federal funds being used for human cloning because everyone was waiting for humans to be cloned. And and if they were cloning a sheep 30 years ago, God knows what they can do now, basically. And they could like replace their hearts, their livers. Like a lot of people, like Paris Hilton, she's got two babies, but she didn't really have them. Maybe a human clone underneath had them. I mean, where's the surrogate? I'm sorry, that might be
Yes.
going a bit too far, but
No, it's
sorry.
not. It's really not going too far because you're absolutely right. Anyone who thinks this sounds, off the beaten path or crazy should really just do a minimal amount of research on where cloning technology was, like you said, even in the 90s. And so who would be, attached to advanced cloning projects? Rich people, elite people, powerful people, presidents. Like, it's not as if you're saying that the you know car repair shop down the street doubled as a human cloning center underneath. You're saying that people who have the funds, the means, and the interest in doing all of these things were doing it. So it's 100% believable to me. And, I hate that we live in a world where you have to even apologize for the truth and say, sorry if it sounds this way. And then we have a government that is bold-faced lying and people will believe them, but people will hesitate to believe the victims when they're telling you straight out what it is. And on the topic of you seeing a UFO, we know, if you've done any research on the UFO topic, that you can't research UFOs without coming across the concept of underground bases from the military. And if you think that's crazy, that just means you haven't researched the topic of underground bases or UFOs. And so I 100%, when you have an operation sealed in the protection of blackmail, it's not just, you have to think they don't just sit on this blackmail, until something comes up to pull it on somebody. They have now an entire operation where a huge number of secret operations and projects and things can be taking place. Not just sex with children, not just sex with women against their will, but other types of secretive projects. If there's more in this world that goes on that's a secret than just sex trafficking. That's clearly a part of the story and the part that most people are familiar with. But I'm glad that you talk about the other parts too, because we deserve to know everything. And so long as the government's lying, you have the podium now. We're listening to you now.
Gosh, be well, we've all got to listen to ourselves, and we've got to listen to our own research.
Yes.
I've been lucky enough to be afforded the time to do the research, and unlucky enough to be kidnapped by these assholes. So I've made it my life mission to catch them. I don't care if I die doing it, as long as I make some difference in the world. But thank you
Yeah.
so much, because
Yeah.
another thing with underground bases is Epstein's ranch is directly between Dulce Base and Roswell. So it's very much in the area where a lot of this stuff goes on.
Yes,
You know,
Dolce
another,
Base. If people don't
yeah.
know, Dolce Base is basically just, you know, openly known at this point. There's an underground base there where there's advanced technology being tested, and I think that what people who want to be turned off by the phrase UFO, you know, it's not just victims of the Epstein operation here that have had experiences seeing UFOs. There are millions of people across the globe, and this is a thing that goes back throughout history and throughout time. You can look at people in the 1800s, coming forward and saying that they're seeing things in the sky they don't understand. That there's a precedent for this that goes back a long time, and it's all deeply tied to advanced technology, aerospace companies, which is why it's interesting you said that NASA is having a mass resignation thing happening. And all these things go together. The occult in general is deeply tied to the UFO topic. And I don't want to go just fully just
Well,
talking about only that, but it's important for people to know.
in Zimbabwe, there's a school where 62 children witnessed a UFO in 1994. People must look it
Mhm.
up online.
Right. And it doesn't have to
In
be an
Zimbabwe.
alien from Mars, It could be as simple as there is a portion of society that has access to technology. We don't. We know for sure the military does. What do you think the drones were? That Trump also refuses to disclose despite promising to.
Well,
It's all really
well,
just in your face, and it's up to people to really fight through the kind of emotional response to shut it all down. That's what I've really come to learn about conspiracy theories in general, is that 99.9% of the time, the only thing stopping you from just understanding the truth and seeing what's really happening in the world is sort of a trauma response that we all have to admitting to ourselves that the lie can be that big. But clearly, the lie can be that big and even bigger than anyone thinks. I'm horrified by the Trump administration's response to this. And you know, at the end of the day, I'm not going to beat myself up too hard about being duped, because between him and Kamala Harris, there was one person promising to release the Epstein files. And in my mind, that alone, logically meant that he wasn't implicated as committing crimes. But now that he's in and he's refusing so hard, it's hard to deny that there is some involvement with him, obviously. And it's just clear as day. And again, that goes back to that's my own sort of emotional response to I don't want to believe that, maybe, right? The same way that people have that about topics that we're talking about. I can't, adjust to a worldview where UFOs exist because it's an emotional thing. People don't realize it. I probably didn't realize that when it came to Trump. And the situation's worse than I thought. We're looking at two sides here. We probably have presidents from both sides on the list, politicians from both sides. It's insane. And so that's why I say, it's just my own personal. I'm more so looking for spiritual solutions here, because political ones don't seem to be cutting it anymore.
right.
But let me ask you, do you have any hope remaining that the truth can come out in a government disclosure format?
No. I
Okay.
knew they'd never release this. I mean, that's why I did an interview recently with an amazing guy, and he said they're doing their due diligence. They're going to be releasing the list. And I just started laughing. Like, I just know they're not going to. Because if
Hmm.
they release the list, that's the end of the government. And with the end of the government will mean the end of religion. It'll mean the end of society as it is, which will be a good thing for the people, but a bad thing for them. Because people have been kept as slaves. You get rich slaves, you get poor slaves. All of us are slaves in ways. A lot of
Hmm.
people, they own the houses. The bank owns their houses. The banks own their cars. We can't trust the banks. We can't trust the system. I mean, we learned that long ago in South Africa.
Right.
Our electricity went off, and it's we learned not to trust our government a long time ago. But
Right.
what you can trust is people. I promise you that much.
I agree. So here is a question that is pretty contentious. We know, again, anybody who's researched this even a little bit, that there were connections between Jeffrey Epstein and the CIA. If you research a little deeper, you see there was also
Yeah.
between Jeffrey Epstein and the Mossad over in Israel, and also the KGB and MI6. It's clearly the Western world was using him in general. Do you know that firsthand? Did you hear or see any evidence of that while you were being affected by this?
He told me he worked with CIA.
Mm.
Before I was sent home from there, he told me he had my family's name on a list. He told me he worked with the CIA. And then he told me that a girl who accused him of rape, he planted drugs in her apartment and had her sent to prison. So, I mean, it was very obvious
Scary.
threats. And also Leslie Wexner and Maxwell apparently were both working with Mossad. And, people say Mossad CIA, it's the same thing. And FBI.
Right.
It's all the same thing. The FBI wanted to fly me there to interview me about the whole Epstein thing, but they didn't want to interview me on Zoom because I won't travel without my child. and they wouldn't let my child's father wouldn't let us travel. So when I couldn't travel there, they no longer wanted to interview me. They only wanted to interview me in person.
That is disgusting. I mean, okay.
Yeah, it's
What I'm getting
suspicious.
from, yeah, that's a disgrace that our FBI would treat you that way.
They never
And
took my statement.
they didn't take a statement from someone who was paid out from the Epstein. Wow. And so I see now why you mentioned laughing at the thought of the government coming forward with this. It was the government doing it. So you can't really get the government to tell on itself, right?
No. I learned from Epstein not to trust the government. When he kidnapped me, when Clinton watched the modeling casting, then that's when I realized the government are liars.
Yeah. I agree. It's clear as day. It's one of those things. That's just a fact of life. And the government has partook in human trafficking and in other operations throughout history as well. You look at MK Ultra, you look at MK Often, you look at so many things, putting chemicals in the water to affect school children just to see what would happen if we give
Yeah.
them this disease. They play with our lives like it's nothing. And yet we're paying taxes to them, we're subservient to them. If we don't pay enough in our taxes or we get a number wrong, the IRS is coming on our door, but they can get away with what they've done to you and so many other people, countless people.
I
Because
don't, do you know? Yeah. So
no, keep going.
10% of at least 10% of people in prison in America apparently they're unfairly.
Oh, I
People get
believe that.
framed. I've read that somewhere.
I'm sure it's
There's a lot
more.
of
I believe that.
injustice in this world. Yeah. And also you've got like people like in the Skull and Bone Society, people in positions of power, sorry, my pups, government, judges, politicians, lawyers. They have it's like a boys' club. So like if
Oh, it
basically
is.
one of them gets caught doing something, they just get off with it. How do
Oh,
you
it
think
is.
Epstein got off in like 2006,
Yep.
He just
And
laughed
and
about it.
you brought up Skull and Bones, which is another maybe the takeaway for people watching this is there's just some things everyone needs to start looking up. So look into the UFO topic, look into Skull and Bones. Skull and Bones is a fraternity out of Yale that is satanic and they participate in satanic ritual. People need to look up all of that, and that's why it gets so complicated, but I know exactly what you're saying.
Well, do you know what? You've just actually hit the nail on the head there. They're segregating people. It's like, are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? In Africa, we've had the same thing. It's like a color thing here. And it's like they try to segregate us through these sort of class systems and color crap. And we don't care about that. People love each other. Any decent person who hasn't been too brainwashed understands that we are all people here and we all work together. But they segregate people because how is a Democrat so different to a Republican? Actually, at the end of the day, not the people in charge. I'm talking about the actual people.
Right.
And I
And
suppose
even
that's why
now,
it's
the
sort of that
people in
must going on
charge,
the middle party. Sorry, Blair.
even now, how much different are the people in charge if both of our last two presidents covered up the Epstein files? It's what are we really voting
Yeah,
for at the end of the day?
yeah, and the way that they lied, like just don't promise it, don't say they're going to release it, and
Right.
then go and lie like that because it actually hurts people
Hmm.
badly, and it makes everyone question everything.
Right. And maybe people should. And I
No, it's good.
I imagine that there is a thought process within the administration, even beyond, maybe covering up for individual people, like maybe Trump, maybe someone else. There's probably a thought process that if this came out, society would crumble in a lot of ways, if we have, you know, the heads of these bankers, the heads of these banks that own us, if Bill Gates, if the heads of huge charities, presidents from both political aisles, that maybe they think that everything would just fall apart. But you know what? I don't want to live in a society that is propped up on the types of crimes that happen to you and others. I don't want to live in a world where we have to protect pedophiles or everything falls apart. I think it should
Yeah.
fall apart then and let's rebuild.
Definitely. A world where there are bombs going off and children getting murdered, a place where there are
Right.
people starving unfairly when there's an abundance of earth, air, water, and seeds. They just control everyone. And, as far as the banks go, I wanted to also say, with JP Morgan, human trafficking, how they paid all that money to the victims. There's a lot of other weird stuff that goes on with JP Morgan. Apparently they had the butterfly trust with Epstein. Because I had a blue butterfly on my diary in the year that I was taken there, and I put the butterfly on my diary before I was even taken there. And I've got a painting that I did with a butterfly and a reptile before I even met. It was weird. Then Virginia Giffey used the blue butterfly as her Twitter logo. At the time, X logo now. And Sarah Ransom has a blue butterfly tattooed on her arm. And then, so they started the Butterfly Trust in 2014 or
Wow.
2013 to pay off victims and accomplices. It was Epstein's trust started, and then I realized one day that the butterfly is shaped like the human hips. So if they were taking our eggs, it would make sense to call it the Butterfly Trust. Then there's also more weird stuff with JP Morgan, like they had code words of Disney princesses like Beauty and the Beast and Snow White, and like him and Epstein were having these conversations where they were using Disney princess names. I'm still digging deeper into all that.
Well, they
I'm
love
trying to
Disney.
figure it out.
They love
Yeah, we
Disney
do. Yeah, Disney
because
princesses.
Walt Disney was also part of the
A
same secret
Satanist.
societies
Yeah.
that they are part of. He was a Rosicrucian. Many of the old Disney movies, if you look back, have many occult messaging and themes in them. So that they love Disney because Disney was one of them. Where do we go from here? Because we're at a complete crossroads where everyone should either be coming to terms with or already has come to terms with the fact that the government's never going to be transparent about this. So, is there a line of action now beyond listening to just you and others directly? What can we do to help the victims right now?
Well, we're all victims of this, to be honest. I think the best thing we can do is just do as much research as we can, keep aware, keep awake, share information, stay awake, be kind, be loving, care about others. Start to realize that we've been living a lie in many ways.
Hmm.
And
I
to not trust the government, to because things will start changing, but it's Rome wasn't built in a day. It's step by step.
I'm so thankful that you shared all this with us. This has been so valuable, and I just think that all I can do is help platform you and talk to you and bring light to this. And I encourage every other creator in the space that I'm in to do the same with you and with others. And God bless you. And thank you so much for sharing. And I'm so obviously glad that you've survived and are now thriving and have so much love in your life with your son. And I think that's beautiful. And it shows that there is, like you started at the beginning of this, you can laugh after tragedy, and you've shown that today. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me on, and thank you to everyone for listening. And I just send everyone lots of love, and let's hope the world becomes a better place.